Hello there, and welcome to another of the Spink Medal Department pre-auction podcasts. This time for the 7th and 8th of April sale. And what a year it's been. I think the third podcast since the dreaded COVID pandemic, but we are still here and medals are still flying, as you can well see. It's been another stellar year for the department, a record number of lots sold. And as we put this video out, you'll have all enjoyed the first e-sale of the year. And I'm sure you'll be looking forward to a number of those coming. So watch this space. We've already got a number of lots prepared and ready to go as the year moves forward. But what I'm going to do here, and I'll be followed by Harry and Robert, of course, is just to give you a little preview of a few of our favourite lots coming up on the 7th and the 8th. This auction is a usual room auction. Obviously, due to the restrictions we still have in place here in the UK, sadly it will be behind closed doors, but you can bid in all the usual ways via Spink Live, on the phones, or with your commission bids if it's too early or too late in the morning or the evening for you to participate. So, everything rocks and rolls as always here, and you'll also be looking forward to hearing that after the 12th of April, hairdressers will also reopen, so we will be thankful for that. I'm going to begin with the senior service and lot 336. This is the group, the KCB group of Admiral Sir Geoffrey Miles. This group is sold by order of a direct descendant and includes a run of about 10 or 12 lots of a number of generations of the family and a number of items of rather interesting militaria. But the main lot is lot 336, which is his campaign awards, his KCB, which you can also see here, and his Legion of Honour, all housed within his rather lovely leather box, which he kept it himself. Miles was a long-served naval officer, went into the Royal Navy as a cadet, served during the Great War, as you can see from his trio, and his finest days were probably seen in senior command during the Second World War. Having commanded a ship at the start of the war, he was then sent to head up the British military mission to Russia in 1941 upon the entry of the Soviet Union, and he was the senior representative of the senior service during that mission. Hugely politically interesting. Obviously, Miles was one of the key players in getting Churchill to come out to Moscow for the conference. And there's a number of rather lovely photographs of Miles and his men. He was there when the German guns were firing within range of Moscow, and he lived through it all. He was a regular visitor to the Kremlin, was toasted by Stalin and Molotov, and even had a few run-ins with the troupe of the Bolshoi Ballet. So well worth going to read if that floats your boat. But after that successful mission to Russia, he was appointed Deputy Naval Commander of Southeast Asia with Lord Mountbatten. And after the end of the Second World War, he was actually put as Commander-in-Chief of the combined Royal Indian Navy and was its final Commander-in-Chief. And you'll obviously see sitting in front of me is this rather superb KCSI set of insignia bestowed upon Admiral Miles. That comprises the subsequent lot 337, and carries a pre-sale estimate of 8 to 10,000. Star of India, possibly the most beautiful, intricate order ever produced by this country, and one of the final awards. And so do have a look at those. The campaign group with the KCB and the Legion of Honour is lot 336, estimated at 3 to 4,000, and the KCSI 8 to 10,000. And also worth noting, his son was also a very long-served submarine commander who served for a long period in HMS Clyde during the Second World War, participated in the Malta convoy runs, supplying the besieged island, and then also an important cog in the SOE operations in the Far East towards the end of the war. Again, go and have a read about that. Operation Hatch. His ship was a key player in the bombardment of the Andaman Islands and the landing of SOE agents. So great stories, and then Miles also went on to command a ship and earned a mention in dispatches during the Korean War. So a family with long and rich naval history, and also with number of items, militaria, midshipmen's dirks, those sort of things. So go and have a look. And as I said, sold on behalf of the family, so fresh to market. What more could you want as a collector? So we go from the Royal Navy, and then I'd like to move on onto the Army. And showing in front of me is this rather moving battalion COs, CMG, DSO group, group of 8, to Brigadier General Gerald Ponsonby Synod Hunt, who was the commanding officer of the 1st Battalion Berkshire Regiment, a veteran of the Boer War, as you can see by his QSA, KSA pair, veteran of Mons 1914, and then tragically killed in action at Marencourt in March 1918. And this group is one of my favourites because of the archive which accompanies it. You've got his memorial scroll, you've got his mention in dispatches, and a number of letters from comrades who are with him throughout the war and at his tragic death. I've got one piece of original material here which I thought was well worth showing you, and that is actually the recommendation put forward for Hunt for the Victoria Cross at the time of his death. That was eventually downgraded to another mention in dispatches for him, but is a really moving piece of original material from the period, and notes his conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty on March the 23rd. I shan't read it all for you, but it is there online. And it closes, he showed an utter disregard for his own safety throughout the day, and all his efforts directed towards restoring a very critical situation. He personally held up the enemy for 2 hours when the flanks were exposed, and then succeeded in withdrawing his men from a position which had no longer become tenable. So a most poignant group to a Brigadier General, twice decorated, bunch of mentioned dispatches, and just a really classic battalion COs killed in action group. And 6,000 to 8,000 should make a little bit more than that, and I've got high hopes for that when it comes up on the morning of the 7th. So you've had the Royal Navy, you've had the Army perspective. Of course, there is another good offering of Royal Air Force. We've got a number of early awards of the AFM and the DFM. We've got a number of casualties, a couple of, again, very well documented Royal Flying Corps casualty groups, and also a number of very interesting interwar awards, scarce awards for pioneering, deck flying. That's a very nice AFC for that. So again, just have a look online. There's plenty out there. There's plenty for every taste and every pocket as well. So do go and have a look. The final lot I would like to give you my take on is lot 375. That is the exceptionally rare George Medal Group of 3 to Dr. Mac McNairn. This is a really fitting one because as we film this, it is exactly 80 years to the day that she won her George Medal. Dr. McNairn had qualified as a doctor in the 1930s, and at the outbreak of war, she wasn't permitted to join the Royal Army Medical Corps. They said they had enough female doctors, and so she went and took up the position of medical officer in charge of the children's wards at Plymouth General Hospital. And on the 20th of March 1941, it was fitting that the King and the Queen had paid their first visit to Plymouth during the Great War, and that evening a swarm of German aeroplanes descended on the city and dropped thousands of tons of incendiary and high explosive bombs. One of those bombs fell straight through the city hospital and destroyed the children's ward in which Dr. McNairn was tending her patients and a number of newborns and a number of women in labour. The citation goes on to say how she was buried up to her neck in rubble. She also suffered a number of broken ribs in the process. Having been extricated, she simply refused to have any medical treatment and went straight back to work. She continued to work for around 36 hours before practically collapsing and being ordered home. It's no surprise that she was put forward for the George Medal for her gallantry on that day. Just to give you an idea of the damage that was caused in the bombing, in the ward alone there were sadly 14 babies that were killed and 3 of her fellow nurses killed during that raid, so that tells you just how serious it was. This is an exceptionally rare award of the George Medal to a female recipient. Since its inception in September 1940, around 2,200 George Medals have been bestowed. Just 68 of those have been to women, and of those 68 there are just 3 to qualified doctors. So this is a rarity beyond the Blitz factor, beyond the female factor. You know, it is a huge rarity, and it's one which I've really enjoyed researching, and I hope it will perhaps go and find a home back in the locality of where it was won. So that's my final lot I'll talk about. That's lot 375, the George Medal Group of 3 to Mac McNairn, and estimate 7,000 to 9,000. Let's see what happens on the day. So that's my offerings for you, and I'm sure Harry and Robert will now give you a few musings and a few of their favourites. And I look forward to seeing you bright and early, 10 a.m. on the 7th and the 8th. And as always, bidding fingers at the ready, please. And I'll now hand over to Harry with a few of his favourite items. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Hello, everyone. I have some very interesting lots to talk about today, starting with lot 392, the very fine MC Group of 4 to Liam Lionheart Armstrong, Royal Marines, for Opticana 2002. Armstrong was born in Carlisle. He actually wanted to be a professional footballer before joining the Marines. Unfortunately, after tryouts for Queen of South, he was informed that he didn't have the right spirit, and so in 1999 he joined the Royal Marines, deploying first of all with 42 Commando to Sierra Leone, before finally transferring to 45 Commando for Afghanistan. Whilst there, he served during Operation Buzzard, part of Operation Tucana. Armstrong was aware that if the insurgents inside were given time to arm themselves, it could very well result in casualties for his unit. As a result, he elected to storm the compound as quickly as possible, tearing down a portion of the border wall and breaking in with another Marine. Together they began to clear the compound room to room, coming across a group of 9 insurgents and succeeding in disarming them without a shot being fired. Later, Armstrong was placed on crowd control and managed to contain the hostile gathering which was taking place outside the compound, even succeeding in snatching an escaped prisoner from the middle of the crowd without the situation escalating. When he was first informed that he had won the Military Cross, he thought it was a joke, believing that the award was reserved only for officers. However, on 16th July 2003, he did in fact go to Buckingham Palace and receive the Military Cross. This lot is estimated at £14,000 to £18,000. The next lot I'm going to talk about is this, the 1842 First Opium War China Medal to Acting Master Edward Roberts of the Honourable East India Company ship Sesostris. The Sesostris took part in the later stages of the First Opium War, starting with the capture of the city of Amoy, where it helped to reduce the Long Battery. After this, the capture of the fortified city of Qinghai. However, the really interesting moment in its career occurred during the siege of, or the defence, I should say, of Ningpo, when the Chinese floated fire rafts down the river in an attempt to burn the British fleet at anchor. The Sesostris, along with the Modeste, commanded by Captain Watson, launched their boats to drag these fire rafts away from the British fleet, and it was, as Captain Watson said, only by the exertions of Captain Roberts, or Acting Master Roberts, that the fire rafts were dragged away. He also goes on to say that once they reached shore, in a rather casual fashion, he states that they then exploded. So the threat to the fleet was very genuine. The Sesostris went into action again later on in the war at the Battle of Wusung, taking part in the early stages of that battle, attacking the fort of Pianshaw. During this engagement, it received 11 shots to the hull, only slightly less than the HMS Blonde, which received 14, and Watson himself was injured in the engagement. It's worth noting that this is one of only 4 medals remaining to this ship. This China medal, 1842, carries a pre-sale estimate of £1,000 to £1,200. The next and final lot I'll be talking about is lot 494, the trio of the QSA with 4 clasps and British War and Victory pair, to Major Edmund Sylvester Jackson of the 6th Inniskilling Dragoons. Jackson was born in 1865 and joined the army in 1885, first becoming a lieutenant in the North Staffordshire Regiment before transferring in 1889 to the 6th Inniskilling Dragoons. He joined the Boer War in 1900, having been delayed in joining the conflict, acquiring remounts for his regiment. However, he certainly made up for lost time, being involved in a number of very active patrols and being ambushed on at least one occasion. However, his key action, as I see it, took place on the 22nd of April 1901, whilst he was serving as Provost Marshal for Colonel Allenby, later General Allenby of Palestine and Egypt fame, and took a small patrol of men to a farmhouse near the column's line of march to make a search of the building. When they arrived at the farmhouse, they were ambushed by a much larger group of Boers, and one of his men was shot from his horse. The horse promptly stampeded. Jackson succeeded in reining it in and bringing himself, the horse, and the rest of the unit back to the injured man, beginning a very one-sided firefight. Fortunately for Jackson's command, the heavy guns at the rear of Colonel Allenby's column spotted the fight in progress and opened fire, allowing Jackson's unit to disengage. Unfortunately, however, it was too late for Jackson, who had been hit in the arm by an exploding round, had his arm shattered. He was in fact reported dead. He did in fact survive and went on to be promoted Major in 1902, joining the Reserve of Officers in 1905. Whilst there, he wrote a regimental history, the Inniskilling Dragoons, the record of an old heavy cavalry regiment. Despite age and disability, Jackson did go on to serve in the First World War, rejoining active service on the 6th of August 1914, serving first in a cavalry depot before going on to become second in command of the 2nd Reserve Cavalry Regiment. In 1917 he also took on a staff position. In 1920 he returned to the Reserve of Officers, his rest well and truly earned, I think, and died in 1935 in Templecombe. This lot is estimated at £200 to £300. So that is everything I'm going to talk about, and now I'll pass you over to Robert, who will finish us up.
Hello there, and with thanks to Harry for his coverage of a few choice lots, and of course Marcus, first thing, I am going to round off our little selection for our April sale. I have 4 lots to share with you today, and as you might expect, a decent and varied selection covering several hundred years worth of military history. And without further ado, as those of you who are regular viewers may know, with my particular interest in the Napoleonic Wars, I have this rather nice Brunswick Waterloo medal. Now, admittedly, we are a little light on early medals in this sale compared to previous sales, but this is an extremely nice example of what I frankly believe is quite an underrated medal. Now, as those of you with an interest in the Napoleonic Wars and the Battle of Waterloo will know, the Allied army commanded by the Duke of Wellington on the 18th of June 1815 was very much an Allied force. It wasn't just the British Army. There were Germans, Hanoverians, Belgians, Dutch, and of course the Prussians later on came into the battle to help us beat Napoleon. So this Brunswick-Waterloo Medal was awarded to all those of the Duke of Brunswick's contingent that participated in both the battles of Quatre Bras and Waterloo on the 16th and 18th of June respectively. But the particularly nice thing about this example is, of course, it is named to a captain in the 3rd Line Battalion. So Brunswick-Waterloo medals to middling to senior officers are, of course, rather scarce. And this example to Captain von Bremen is a particularly nice example, not just as an officer, of course, but it's in rather nice condition. The reason I believe, of course, that they are undervalued, both by collectors and, of course, consequently in price, is they command a far lower sum than a British Waterloo medal. You know, if you had a captain in a British regiment at Waterloo, his medal would be expected to raise, you know, significantly more money than that to an officer in a Brunswick regiment. Whether you agree with that or not, I'll leave up to you, but to me, seems like rather criminal, because this chap was actually there on that famous day on the 18th of June. So a lovely thing, in my opinion, and I hope it will do rather well. And the Brunswick certainly saw plenty of action, so it's not as if he was sort of standing at the back of the queue all day, not doing anything at all. So read up about the Brunswick contingent at Waterloo and what they did during the 100 Days campaign, and I'm pretty certain that this will find a good new home. It is lot 974 in the April sale, with an estimate of £800 to £1,000. And I would confidently expect it to do a little bit better than that. So the next lot, we move on now to the First World War. I have two Great War groups to share with you. The first one, however, I think is really my favourite, certainly of the two, and indeed one of my favourites of the whole sale. It is this interesting group of four, a British War and Victory pair, Efficiency Medal India, and an Air Efficiency Award. Now, first of all, this strikes me as quite unusual, and hopefully you as well, because we have three medals for the reign of George V. We then skip George VI entirely and go straight on to Elizabeth II. And therein lies a fascinating story. These were awarded to a pilot during the First World War, and a chap called Leslie Reed Blacking, who interestingly flew night bombers over the Western Front in the last year of the war. And what makes this so special is that not only do we have the medals for auction, but we have this marvellous personal archive, which really does tell you all about the man behind the medal. A few highlights I will briefly share with you. These are a few of many. It's this photograph album featuring lots of black and white photographs, both of Blacking himself, but also the aircraft that he flew, mostly Handley Page 0400s. We have a few letters that he wrote to his parents whilst on active service, and that is noted at the top of the letter. And the best thing of all, I think, that gets me very excited, certainly, is this book. A recent publication, comparatively, called Darkness Shall Cover Me, Night Bombing Over the Western Front, 1918. And it is all about Blacking's life. It was written in 1989 by a chap who clearly knew Blacking, because the account inside, it is semi-autobiographical. It's written in the form of a novel rather than a pure and plain autobiography. But the information contained within, it's impossible to make up. It had to have been written with Blacking's information, with his approval, with his input, and it covers the last year of the war, from the time he joined the newly formed Royal Air Force of April 1918 up to the armistice in November of that year. And it's fascinating. I read it in the whole thing from cover to cover in the course of cataloguing this group. And what I particularly like is that even things that he's written about his parents in 1918 are mentioned in the book. And it just brings the whole story together so nicely. Blacking, after the First World War, went into banking and spent a long time in the Far East and India, hence his efficiency medal with the India suspension. That is named to him as a trooper in the Karachi Corps, nice and exotic there. And what is really quite intriguing as well, that he saw absolutely no service during the Second World War. According to his book and other records, he spent the entirety of 39 to 45 in America, managing a bank in New York. So it's rather quite unusual that we've skipped George VI entirely in his medal entitlement. And then we go into Elizabeth II, because once he moved back to the United Kingdom post-war, he then sort of returned to the fold and joined the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, staying in it long enough to be awarded his Air Efficiency Award in the 1960s. Now, if you think at this point he was in his 60s himself, so he was getting on a bit, but clearly still eager to do his bit and justly rewarded at the end of his career. And died at a ripe old age in the Channel Islands. So an absolutely fascinating lot. I absolutely love it. And I think for the Royal Air Force, the RFC collector, mainly of First World War interest, of course, but other things as well, you've got this wonderful, wonderful snippet of one person's life contained in a single lot. So I think, again, this should do rather well. It's lot 616 with an estimate of £700 to £900, and it's worth all of that, and I hope a little bit more. So, going on to another First World War group here, with another one of my favourites, is this rather fantastic Battalion CO's DSO group. Now, you'll remember my colleague Marcus talking about another Battalion CO's DSO group a little earlier. Well, here's another one. And this is rather fine because it was awarded to the commanding officer of the London Scottish, a territorial regiment that of course is still going to this day, and a regiment that is quite rightly very proud of its heritage, history and tradition. And indeed they have a marvellous military museum or regimental museum in their headquarters on Horsefree Road in Westminster. If you've never been, I would thoroughly recommend it. Now, this group was awarded to Colonel Malcolm of the London Scottish, who is well known for several reasons. Firstly, he was a long-serving member of the regiment, and for a long time, of course, he only had a single medal, his Edward VII Long Service Medal, then shortly afterwards his Coronation Medal for 1911, then by the end of the war it accumulated so many more. The London Scottish were the first territorial regiment to see action during the Great War on the Western Front, and were very well known indeed and became famous for a bayonet charge in which Malcolm led them over the top to push back various German advances. Of course, the second action that I alluded to earlier, the ridge at Messines, in which the battalion was thrust into several gaps in the line that were appearing due to German assaults and German attacks, and the London Scottish on several occasions forced them back, took very heavy casualties indeed, but every time they repulsed the Germans, and when the assaults were too great to bear, they withdrew, but counter-attacking at every opportunity and undertaking a wonderful and well-documented rearguard action against the Germans. So they made the Germans pay dearly for every inch of ground that was taken. Malcolm, of course, was not a young chap by this point. He was in his mid-40s. And so if you think that he was very much in the thick of it with his men, personally, as I say, leading a bayonet counterattack against the Germans, and involved himself in all the same privations as his men, and it's really the classic London territorial action. If you're a collector of London territorial groups to senior officers, They really don't get much better than this. And it's also worth pointing out that this group comes with several other items relating to Malcolm. As you might have seen, there are several silver dog tags. We have a silver presentation box and with the London Scottish crest to the top. And an other ranks regimental sporran, which by repute was worn by Malcolm, possibly during the First World War and his time in the trenches. This group also comes direct from the family, so it has never been on the market previously, which again adds to the excitement that we have in offering it for sale in April. I hope that it's going to do, again, as with everything else, extremely well. It certainly should do. You're unlikely to see groups like this come up very often at auction. It is lot 378 in the sale, with an estimate of £1,500 to £2,000. You can read all about Malcolm's exploits in our cataloguing and online, and see lots of photographs and all that sort of thing. So, on to my final lot. We skip the Second World War entirely and go on to modern, which I haven't really covered much in detail previously, but I couldn't resist this one. It's a rather fantastic MC group of 3, and again, Harry covered an MC group earlier, and so I'm going to do the same here. This MC group of 3 is rather fantastic because it was awarded to a guardsman in the Irish Guards with the probably unique name of Branch Flower, who received his MC during the Battle of Basra. The citation is absolutely cracking, and again, you can read about it in our catalogue and online. The situation basically that he received it for was his section was moving forward to secure an area that had already been engaged by British armoured vehicles, so they weren't expecting any trouble, any resistance whatsoever. As his section commander was issuing orders to the section, all of a sudden these 2 Iraqis emerged and engaged the section with automatic weapons, and the account goes that as this happened, the section sort of hit the ground apart from Branch Flower, because he saw an Iraqi insurgent holding a grenade in the act of throwing it towards his section. And as his account states, he shot the man because he knew it was either the man or his mates, and made that split decision. He stood up when all his comrades were on the ground, shot the insurgent carrying a machine gun, and indeed shot the insurgent about to throw the grenade. Branch Flower dealt with the insurgents and received a justly deserved military cross. It's worth briefly breaking down the awards of the MC for the Iraq conflict to give you a perspective on just how rare an award this is. There were only 84 awards of the military cross for Iraq. This is the only award of an MC to an other rank in the Guards. Of those 84, just 20 cover the period for which the clasp to his Iraq medal are awarded. And of those 20, so we're narrowing it down quite considerably here, only 3 went to the Irish Guards for Iraq. So this is one of 3, incredibly rare, and the chances of you finding another one are basically 0, all things considered. So for a gallantry collector, for a Guards collector, for an Irish Guards collector, for anyone interested in Irish regiments, this is just the thing. And it is lot 393 in our April sale with an estimate of £10,000 to £12,000. And like everything else, we are pretty confident it's going to do better than that. You'll see many other modern groups in the April sale. So that covers everything from my small collection I have to share with you. You've heard Marcus, you've heard Harry. We've got a wonderful selection of things over 2 days. I think it's just shy or just around the 1,500 lot mark. So a little smaller than December, but not by much. And lots to suit every interest in every pocket. And as Marcus said, you know how to do it by now. You can bid online. You can see us there live on your webcams, and so it's as if you're in the room. We look forward to another strong sale, lots and lots and lots of things on offer, and we look forward also to, of course, seeing you again in person before too long. So by the time our auction has gone up, it won't be long before we can come and see you, you can come and see us, and hopefully things will be back to normal. So thank you very much indeed. I hope you've enjoyed our little coverage here, and happy bidding on the days.